Welcome to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I'm your host, Shade Curry, and I believe every divorced woman deserves a romantic relationship where she feels safe, loved, and cherished. You can create the most amazing life after divorce, and I will teach you how. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dating After Divorce podcast. I have another Remarriage Club story for you here today. With me is Leah Davidson, and Leah is also a life coach. She is specifically a stress and resilience coach. Welcome, Leah. Please introduce yourself and tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here and to be part of this club.
Yes. It's exclusive.
I know. It's the most exciting part. So my name is Leah, and as you mentioned, I am a life coach, and I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada as well. As my background, I am also a speech-language pathologist, and that is sort of what led me to the area of life coaching, as I worked for 23 years as a speech pathologist with people who had experienced traumatic brain injuries. Mm-hmm. And along the way, I started doing some life coaching because I saw that so many of the tools were relevant with my clients who had these injuries. And then just naturally, people started asking me when they heard I was doing some coaching, they started asking me, well, I don't have an injury, but I'm going through these other challenges in my life. Would you be able to help? And really, adversity, it just comes in different shapes and sizes for all of us. So I started to do coaching. And so it's almost like with a lot of people, their niche gets more defined. And it's almost like my niche widened, because I went from working exclusively as a speech pathologist with people with brain injury to now doing more general life coaching, but specifically with people who are going through stressful periods of their life, and they want to come out stronger. They just don't want to get by. They want to become more resilient, and that's what I help them do.
Oh my gosh, so good. Like, who doesn't need that, right?
Yeah,
like
I know. I'm really doing it for myself.
I mean, like, I can see points in my life where I have needed that. Like, and I know there's a stress scale. I think the Rahe stress scale that talks about all these incidents that create stress. Like, I think when you get married or have a baby or get a divorce,
good or bad stress,
good and bad stress. For sure. Divorce has several of those incidents all tied in. You lose a family member. You also move. You tend to move. You know, all the things happen when you're
all the things. And I do think that as much as my background with working with people who have gone through pretty tough times where their lives have changed because of accidents or injuries, my own personal experience of divorce sort of, was an adversity that I had to choose to get through. Was I going to, that cliche, will I be bitter or will I be better? Yes. And it is a choice. It's definitely a choice. You don't necessarily make the choice for the adversity to come in, and whatever it is for you, whether it's a loss, an injury, or divorce, you have to decide what you're going to do with that.
Yes. Yeah. We can get better. And I don't know if I'm going to say this one, but I've heard about like the analogy of like muscles when you work out at the gym.
Yeah.
And you're growing muscles, but literally what's happening is you're tearing the muscle.
Yeah.
And then it's healing back together stronger than it was before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's jump right into your story.
Yes.
You had a pretty, devastating, traumatic experience with infidelity in your first marriage. Could you just tell us the story? What happened and how did that impact you?
Yeah, I mean, we had been married, and we actually had just had our second baby, and I was going through a difficult time. My father was actually diagnosed with cancer and subsequently passed away, and I just happened to stumble across some phone bills
Mm.
that, checking out the number, whose number is this, checking out the timing and so forth. And, confronted my husband at the time, who admitted that there was another woman, but, and I think this is sometimes a typical story, but, it was nothing. And at that point, actually, I was in a pretty tired space in my life, having lost my father, having 2 young kids, and we decided to work on our marriage. And so we did work on our marriage, and things seemed to be going well. We were planning on having another baby. And then he went away and came back and basically said, I want a divorce, end of story, no more discussion. I didn't know at the time if anybody else was involved. And then several months later, after we had split up, one of my little boys came home and was talking about the friend that Daddy had met. And of course, this friend tied back into the original person.
Was the same person?
Was the same person. So I was pretty devastated. Now, in fairness, years have passed. So I always like saying, that's my story. That's, I know that he has different versions. He has, like everybody has, there's 2 sides for every story. But at that time, it was really devastating to me. He had, he denied certain things, and really it doesn't matter. What comes out of it is our marriage ended. I was a bit of a mess. I felt like I had been fooled. I had been blindsided. I had been stupid and ignorant and all the things that come with shaming myself. Why did I, when I found out at the first time that he had interest in this other woman, why did I stay, and what's wrong with me? And really being very, very hard on myself, which I don't think is too uncommon.
Very common.
Yeah.
Very common.
And, even it's been years later, and it took a lot of work for me to be able to tell the story without attaching that shame to it, that I did at that time what I felt I was capable of doing. Would I do it differently now? Well, yeah, I know a lot of different things now. I have, different experience, different wisdom. But when I look back on that young mother who was, grieving the loss of a parent, going through difficult times, the whole young kids, everybody, the sleeplessness and the body image issues. And I look back at her and I just want to give her a big hug and say, there's no shame. You did what you had to do. And, your perspective now may be different. But when you're in the thick of it,
yeah, 100%. And I look back at my choice of spouse the first time, and like I've done this work too of like really looking back on my past, working through it, going back and forth. What are my thoughts about it? And in the end, I came to the conclusion that like it was just always going to happen that way. Because I go back into my body and into my thinking as a 21-year-old making the choices I was making, and I'm like, there was no window.
There was no way.
There was no window into my brain.
I know.
At that moment, like I have family members who are like, well, if you told us, we could have warned you. And I'm like, no, there was no way I was going to tell you because there were these other factors happening in my life. And it just was going to happen that way.
Yeah. And, it needed to happen that way. Like I look at my first marriage as definitely there was so much growth. There were so many things that I shake my head at and think, why did I tolerate that? At the same time, there were good times. But now that I'm remarried and I have the perspective to look back on, I'm like, I am so grateful for that experience because I'm not sure I would appreciate what I have to the degree that I have. Right now. So, and I think you're right. It was always meant to happen. And when I look back on that younger Leah, I'm like, I think you kind of knew that there were things that just weren't jiving. And it's not to put blame on anybody. I mean, we all have to take responsibility for ourselves, but there were definitely things that I turned a blind eye to. There are definitely things that I would say I abandoned myself. I abandoned what I knew I wanted, all for the sake of love, young love. And we do things and the passion and I can't live without and all those things that, my kids are that age now. And, they're in their early 20s, some of them. And I look at them and I'm like, Oh,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough. You're all doing the best you can with what you know.
100%. Yeah. And you remember what it was like. Like nobody, the old people were just old and didn't know
That's
anything.
it.
And I mean, to be fair, when they look at our lives, I mean, we're not cool.
We're not
We
cool.
don't have it together. So they're like, well, I don't know if I want what you have.
Exactly. So I do think it helps doing that, kind of reauthoring your past, of going back and looking at things from the lens of a little bit more compassion than I probably did the first few years. Really even shying away from telling the whole story and shying away. I think the only person I've ever really shared the ins and outs is my current husband now, because there was so much shame attached to, like, well, was I naive? And this was, he did this because of how I was being and how I acted. And so much, if I was different and had I done this differently, and I knew he wanted this and I knew he wanted that. And so there was so much of that over the years, I think I reauthored, and then it was really that full acceptance when I could tell the whole story without that shame, and saying, you know what, I was young. I did what I had to do. I got 2 amazing, incredible, beautiful children from that marriage. And you know what, he's been a father in their lives, and they love him dearly. And I will always respect him as a father. We just were not meant to be together. Even though we had been together for quite a while, it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. And how long were you together, like dating and your marriage, like the total time?
Oh, I met him when I was just 18, and we divorced, and then we got married. We got married when I was 22. So we were young. And then we were married 11 years when we split up. Yeah. We had 7 years before we had kids. And then I think, and this can happen often, I think kids kind of took things over the edge, in the sense that for me personally, I was a very accommodating person in my 20s. And so I was more than happy to set aside my priorities, my dreams. Not that I didn't do them. I mean, I still went on to accomplish things, but I definitely was more of a pleaser of what he wanted, how he wanted. And then when kids came along, I think there was also something in me that just was just like, no, because I'm dealing with this for my kids now.
Yeah.
So I'm fighting for my kids. And I think that changed the dynamic, because when I went back and I'm like, okay, did I cause him to go out and seek someone else? I think the dynamics in our relationship certainly changed, because I was now a mother, and I was like mama bear. And so things that I might have just glossed over and just been like, oh, whatever, or accommodating, or I wasn't going to be. I was like, no, these are my kids, and I want this for them. And so I do think that changed. So when people say, when I sort of said, oh, I was blindsided with it, I was. But when I look back, I do notice, I'm like, yeah, but I had also changed, and I'm okay that I had changed. We just couldn't change together. We just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so while it was devastating, I don't know at that time if that Leah those years ago would have left. I would have stayed and protect my kids, because my belief system, my values was very much like, I am married, for good, for bad. Getting divorced was not something I had
I used to say, divorce is not an option.
Divorce is not an option. I actually, in all honesty, I probably looked down on people who were divorced, in the sense like, they just couldn't, they were either too selfish, or they weren't willing to put the work in, and so that sort of exploded when my whole life imploded with the divorce. And I sort of realized, like, oh, okay, I've been totally wrong about all that.
Yeah, there are all kinds of reasons for divorce, not just because people couldn't hack it.
Or because they're so selfish that they wanted to deal with their own needs. If I have to hear that one more time, I sort of laugh when I hear that. I'm like, yeah, there's probably cases where it's all about selfishness, but
they're not the majority.
No, It's a tormenting decision, I think. And now I understand on both sides. It's, like my ex-husband was in just as much pain, just differently. I think I probably would have handled it differently, but I don't know. That's
it's like, if you're in pain, infidelity may not be your first choice.
That may not be my first choice, but I have to, at the same time, people are dealing with their own trauma and their own wounds and their own ways of coping and their own, and so I had to come to learn and accept that. And I will say, years later, actually right before I was getting remarried, I was literally sitting in the airport waiting for my flight. My husband and I were getting married out of the country. And my ex-husband called me, and he was watching the boys while I was going off to get married. We were coming back to have a big family celebration, but my husband and I just wanted it to be intimate, just the two of us, so we didn't have to deal with all the kids during the ceremony. And he called me up and he said, I just wanted to let you know how happy I am for you. Oh, wow. And I am, you deserve this. I'm sorry for any kind of pain that I caused. And overall, I'm grateful that you are the mother of my children. And, he apologized and took responsibility for his doings. Has it been smooth sailing ever since? No, but generally speaking, I think we've been able to co-parent. And I think it did have to be both of us taking a little bit of humble pie and saying, okay, our marriage, we were both responsible for what happened. We both made different decisions, different choices. We both probably would have wanted each other to do things differently, but it is what it is. And so I was grateful that we had that conversation because I think it was validating, even though I know we don't necessarily need validation, but it was sort of validating. It's nice to hear.
Some of us give ourselves validation at night when we imagine our exes.
Exactly.
We imagine our exes eating humble pie and that feels good.
Yes. I was very blessed to have that. But, since that time, I've been remarried now 14 years. And since that time, there's been a lot of bumpy roads, a lot of stormy seas with my ex. But I think that's just the nature of, I just remind myself, and that is why we're not married every time one of those situations.
The human, he's a specific kind of human and belongs in this particular box in my life.
That's right. Yeah. And occasionally I have to take him out of the box and deal with something, but I just put him back in.
There you go. I love that. Obviously you've healed and you've dealt with a lot. But I do want to highlight that this is what it can look like.
Yeah.
Down the line when you go through healing, when you work through your own recovery and you rebuild your life the way you want, it can sound the way you sound where, there's still stuff that happens, but I can handle it. And it's not running my life. It's not running my emotions. It's just something that it's like, a task that I have to deal with and I can.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it was interesting because literally a week before this happened to be, my girlfriend, one of my best friends, we worked together as well. She came into work and she told me, my husband left me last night. And they didn't have children and she was just so devastated. And I said, well, I'm totally here for you, going to support you. And then a week later, I was calling her up and saying, guess what happened to me? And so I had this amazing opportunity to have one of my closest friends go through this with me, and we would boister each other up. She, as I mentioned, she didn't have kids, but she became such a strong role in my children's life. But we used to talk, and there was another girl that we worked with, and this other girl had been through a divorce probably about 3 years earlier and was very bitter. And I don't want to blame her for being bitter, but every conversation would end up being about something with her ex or something, how it was unfair or something, how her life had been ruined. And I remember talking with my best friend and saying to her, we had this conversation, we just don't want to be like her. Yeah. And it was sort of eye-opening to see, obviously this woman was still in pain about her divorce, and just making that conscious choice. Divorce is painful, but I don't want to have my life revolve around it. I don't want my story to end here. I don't want it to be like, and this is what it was for this woman. I had a divorce. Everything was pre-divorce and post-divorce. Yes. And I was like, I want divorce to be it's a big blip in my story, but my story goes on. And I want to make sure my story goes on, and it's a really good story. And funnily enough, my this best friend of mine, we met our current spouses within 6 months of each other. And we were both remarried within 6 months of each other. Oh, and we often talk about it now. We're like, remember so-and-so that we worked with? I wonder how she's doing.
And I think that's the power of like that healing coaching journey. Because I recognize when I look at my story where I could have been her. And it was, and like right after my separation, like even during my separation, I knew something was deeply wrong. And I was like, I thought I had it together. I obviously don't. I need to figure out what's going on. So I got into therapy and support and all the things, learning everything about what was going on in my brain pretty early. But even with that, even with being on a healing journey, I was venting so much. Like I just so much that I've been married 17 years, the whole 9 yards. Yeah. He was showing up in extremely crazy ways during the divorce. And I found myself talking about it and just recycling these thoughts. And my best friend was pregnant at the time of my separation. She had a premature baby during 6 months later or a few months into my divorce. And I didn't realize, and I would call her every day. About 45 minutes to vent about whatever the new thing was. Now, she got pregnant again because my divorce took about 3 years. She got pregnant again, had a second premature baby.
Oh my gosh.
The moment the awareness clicked into me that I needed to get over myself was I was visiting her and her baby in the NICU. This is the second baby.
Yeah.
And, she had her hands on him, was kind of warming him up in the NICU. And guess what I was talking about?
Your divorce.
My divorce. And in that moment, I was like, there is something wrong here.
Yes.
I was like, basically, it's been like 18 months plus, and I am still talking about my divorce. And that was the moment that I was like, that's it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yeah.
And I stopped venting cold turkey.
Yeah. Well, I think we do have those moments. I definitely, and that's why when I saw this girl at work, I recognized I'm going down that path. And that's why I had that conversation with my girlfriend. Like, we both are going down that path. And even though we had each other to support, we're actually fueling each other. Yes. Because, this story and this story and this story. And it was all about the stories. And it had to be like this recognition, this awareness, like, do I want to go down that path? And then the awareness of actually, I do have a choice as to whether or not
I can do something different.
Yeah, you feel powerless, right? You're like, well, this happened to me. What else am I supposed to do? This is not fair. And that's where the role of, counseling and coaching. And I definitely got that support. But it really had to be that conscious choice of, this is me. In like a few months, a year, like, this is me. I don't want to be that person. I really, I don't want my divorce being the end and defining me. And everybody remembers, before her divorce and then after.
She became so weird and hard.
Yeah, this bitter mess. And people, let's face it, people do get tired. They tolerate you telling your story for a period of time. And then eventually it's sort of like, okay, get over it. And we may think that they're not being empathetic but there is something to be said about, be careful about all the venting that you do. And that is why coaching and professional help is so helpful.
So yes, it really is. I mean, but I do have thoughts that I think that the short window of being able to talk about it is because I think people who haven't been through divorce don't understand that it's literally like a death. And that there are just so many ramifications. So I would just put out a call for people to just, You can
Yeah.
listen a few more times.
You
It's
can deal with
okay.
it. Well, and I love that death comment because I don't know if you ever heard it because so many people will say like, well, it's not as if they died. Like divorce
Yeah.
is not even, it's not as bad as somebody dying. And I don't like ever making comparisons. And that's something as a coach,
Right.
I talk about a lot. You cannot compare people's pain. But at that time, I can tell you, my thought was like, it would have been better had he died. Because then I would have this
Mm,
story of he loved
yeah.
me and he adored me and he wanted to stay, but he
Mm-hmm.
died. Instead, the story that I'm spinning is he didn't want me. He could have had me.
Yeah.
He chose not to be with me. That kind of hurts more. But,
Right.
you know,
And
like,
then you could have had some community support. People would have brought you
that's
some
right.
casseroles
That
and
casserole,
babysat
everybody's
your
like, oh, instead they sort of get the, oh, I wonder what happened. I wonder,
Yep.
you know,
Yep. Yeah. Like you said, we can't compare the pain, but it really does feel like a huge abandonment
yeah.
because the community doesn't have like support for divorce is not kind of
That's
like a
right.
thing. There's no meal
We don't
train.
have divorce meals. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. We need to
We
start
want the
that.
we want the meal trains, people. We do.
We want the meals. Bring me the meals. Come on.
All right. Well, let's get to the good stuff. I know we kind of went there with just how dark that time can be and how
Yeah.
hard it can be. And I really appreciate you being willing to share what
Mhm.
you went through. So, how long after the divorce did you start dating again? And what was that like for you? Do you wonder exactly how divorced women just like you are meeting eligible men who want a real relationship and a commitment? They're doing it by dating with their core values. Your core values are the GPS that lead you to the partner you've been looking for. When you use your core values on dating apps, text messages, and at social events, you will easily connect with your true match partner without chasing, settling, or wasting time with non-committal men. I have taught exactly how to do this in the 2-hour Core Values Dating Blueprint course available on my website, shadecurry.com/dating. That's SADECURRY.com/dating. You will learn exactly how to identify your core values and use them on your dating profile, how to ask the right questions via text, and how to tell the right stories on dates, so that you attract the right people and repel those who aren't right for you. If you're ready to meet your true match, hop over to shadecurry.com/dating or click the link in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
So it was about, I guess it was about 2 years that I started, a little under 2 years, I started to date. Not very much. I met somebody and I dated him for a period of time. And I really wasn't interested. And it was just out of loneliness. And again, I had one of those wake up moments like, what am I doing if I am going to be dating? This is not. So I cut that off. And I actually had an aunt who at the time who had just been through a divorce. And she had said to me, she's like, Leah, if you're going to be looking for somebody, like go for it all. Like, don't settle. There's no, like, do not settle for anything this time. Like there's no need to.
Yeah.
So I decided, with some help of my friends pushing me along, because I had two very young boys, that I was going to have the summer of dating. This was a time when the Bachelor and Bachelorette were on. I think that's still on, but they were on. And I was like, I'm going to just date as many people as I possibly can. So I went online, and this is going back many years now. So online was not as common as it was now. It had a little bit of a stigma attached to it. I'll share with you, the site was called Lava Life. So
nice.
I went on.
Does it even still exist?
I don't think it still exists, no. But I went onto this site and I created a profile for myself with the help of my friends. And I basically, in my profile, said, I want it all. Like, I listed what I want. You got to be considerate. You got to be, I just wanted it all. And then I proceeded to, the way it works is people will reach out to you and then you have calls. And so I proceeded to go on a bunch of dates. and they were disastrous. Like, I don't think there was one date where I didn't come home in tears. And I just went on in a bunch of them. Now, like I said, I had previously done a little bit of dating. And so I already knew, like, okay, it's not easy. It's not easy out there. A lot of people are, have different challenges. And then being a single mom, I found it really hard. So
and a lot of people have different reasons for dating. And I think sometimes women don't take into consideration. They think, well, I'm showing up as this earnest, honest person wanting a long-term relationship. And then they assume that everyone else should be showing up in the same way. And I'm like, no, people are there for different reasons. No. And you have to allow for that.
That's right. And if you've been married for a while, getting back on the dating scene can be pretty rough because things change. Like I was like, all of a sudden, things were online and people were doing things differently. And it was so intimidating. So I really wanted to throw myself into this online dating, and I had given myself the summer. And I know it's not a short period of time, not a long period of time, but I did it because I said, I want to have fun in the summer, quote unquote. I thought it was going to be fun. I thought it was going to be like The Bachelor, where you go on all these magical dates and helicopters take you everywhere. Oh my gosh, it was not. And I just was...
Just to your point, like if you got married, you said you got married early 20s, right? So at that time, dating, when you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, dating is kind of magical.
Yeah. Oh,
you're like no stakes.
That's right. Yeah.
Half of your money is still coming from your parents. That's so people have money to throw around. You have all this energy. You can go, like it does feel kind of magical to date a lot of people in your early 20s. That's right. All the reasons that I have a cutoff age now with the women that I work with. I'm like, I cannot give you that experience.
It's so true.
I'm not the dating coach for you.
That's right.
In your 20s.
Yeah. So that's it. I was now mid 30s with two children.
Yeah.
And because I had been married younger and my kids were so young, a lot of my peers were actually just having kids or just getting married. And so it was a different experience. And then being in my mid 30s, like the people you meet, I remember going out once with a couple of girlfriends and talking to a guy, and the guy was clearly much younger than me. And he asked me like, so do you live alone? Do you have any roommates? And my friend leaned over and whispered in my ear. She was just like, would now be the time to tell you that you do have roommates? You can say to him, I do. I have roommates, and they're 4 and 5. Like, what do you think of that? Yeah. And so there was a lot of, I had a lot of apprehension about, I'm a single mom. And I think you're also really protective of your kids. So when I would go out on a date, I was sort of considering, what would this person look like in the life of my child and my children?
100%.
And not all the guys that were going out with me were thinking that at all. They're like, what? I'm not considering that. I'm here for a good time. So I went through the summer, and then right at the weekend before Labor Day, I said, I'm done. I'm out. And one of my friends said, no, one more time. Come on, let's just go through the Law of a Life profiles one more time. So we did. This one profile popped up of this guy, and he looked really cute, but there were a bunch of pictures of him that made it look like he was a big party guy. And as I just said, I'm like, I've got 2 kids. I'm not looking for a party guy, but he was cute, and his profile was super witty. So I just sent a little smile. And as I mentioned before, the end of my profile said, like, I want it all. So I sent a little smile. He sent me a note back and said, I want it all too, but let's start with some more pictures. And I was just like, this guy's a bit of a jerk. Like, it just...
It's like, what are you trying to say?
What are you trying to say? So anyhow, we ended up talking and we messaged, and then he said to me, I don't do a ton of messaging. You need to, like, let's have a phone call. I right away need to hear your voice. And then when I got in the call, he said, I call this my crazy call, because I just want to make sure that I'm talking to somebody who's who's sane, because there is a lot of, you never know who you're getting, especially at this time when online dating was newer. We had a great connection, and he had said, like, let's go out, I'll give you a call, which is wonderful. And then he never called. And I was like, what? All the red flags were there.
Yeah.
And about a week or so later, I got a message from him. He said, and it was through the service again. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I totally lost your number, which I was like, great. And
you're like, this guy
is bad news. And he said, like, do you want to go out for brunch? It was like the following Saturday. So I agreed, and I went out, and he was just lovely, like the nicest guy ever. Too good to be true. Like, just polite and kind. He had 3 kids. He talked about his kids all the time. He had shared with me the reason it took so long is just because he's, he had been with his kids all week, and his kids were super young as well. And so I went home, and my girlfriend called me. So what did you think? He was great. He was amazing. Oh, awesome. Are you going to go out with him again? No chance. No chance. She's like, why not? And I was like, because he's too nice. There's going to be something wrong with him. He's too good to be true. He's nice. He's considerate. He seems to be an involved dad. Like, there's no way. And just as I was talking to her, I got a text from him, and we had just finished our date like an hour earlier. And he basically was just like, I know I'm probably not supposed to do this. There's a certain time I'm supposed to wait. I'm not into playing games. I like you. Do you want to go out for dinner again?
Wow. I wanted to back up before getting into this, because oh my God, I'm just enjoying this so much. It's like, but you had all these red flags. I mean, it wasn't a ton of red flags, but it was all the signs that a guy just wasn't into you, or wasn't committed, or just wasn't a serious person. And you still went on that date after that. And I'm guessing you were like, he might turn out to be a jerk.
Yeah.
Like you had that thought. How did you navigate? Because I think a lot of women are like, it's like a 1 or 0, where if there are red flags, there's no room for, I see the red flags. And I don't even want to say red flags, because these aren't like the red flags of like abuse or toxicity.
They're not the same red flags.
They're not the same. These are more
like pinky. Yeah.
Yeah. They're like signs that this guy isn't looking for what I'm looking for, more so.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, preparing yourself to handle that outcome, like being able, a lot of women, I don't want to say, a lot of women will like either deny seeing that potential outcome and just like convince themselves that no, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. He might turn out to be great. Yeah. Which is not quite the same as, I do see these pink flags or yellow flags, and he might turn out to not be committed, and I can handle it. This is a little difference there.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. I think that I had a gut instinct, and I was learning to start to trust my gut again. And part of my gut instinct was like, you know what? If he does turn out to be not who I think he was, I know now that I am not going to be tolerating that. Yeah. I know that. And I sort of had in my mind, date 1 was, I always had this set up, date 1, I get to know somebody. By date 2, I want to know what their story is. Because in my mind, I wanted somebody who was going to be as committed. So if somebody was going to say to me, there's certain things that I just would not tolerate. So I had that trust in myself where I was like, I can give it a try, because if he turns out to be a dud, I'm just not going to go out with him again. I'm not going to I'm much older now. I'm much wiser now. I'm not going to get lured into something. I had developed, I think, in the years that I was on my own, I had developed a certain confidence in myself, because I had to do the work. I had to do the work to get myself out of the shame of this bad, quote unquote, failed marriage to a place where this will never happen again, because I am a different person. So I think combined with my gut feeling was, this guy is funny. As opposed to, I don't know, I can't. And this is where I do think that fate does play a role. because as I got to know my husband, I start to see all these things like just was not him at all. He had somebody else who was doing his profile for him and so forth. So I think it's a combination of my gut feeling and my trust in myself.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Like you're like, well, I don't know enough to make a final decision, but I know I will make the right decision and I will protect myself, and I'm not going to get attached and just let someone string me out for like 6 to 9 months or something.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for elaborating on that.
Yeah.
Because I was like, there's something in there that
I know.
we need to hear. All right. So he asked you on the second date. That's the same night.
Yeah, like an hour later, he said, "Do you want to go out?" And we went to another restaurant. And as soon as we got to that restaurant, we sat down and we started talking. And I just said, "Tell me what your story is. I want to hear the ins and outs." Obviously, when somebody shares their story, it's their story, their version of their story. His story ended up being super unique in the sense that we both lived in Toronto in different neighborhoods, but close enough to each other where there's a lot of talk. And without me knowing it, the year earlier, I had through the grapevine heard about this couple. It was like it was 2 couples that were involved in another neighborhood. The wife of one ended up with the husband of the other, and both husbands had been friends, and all this elaborate story. Little did I know that it was his story. Wow. And so he had shared this story to me. I was just, thank you for your honesty, because it was a quite an explosive story. Like a scandal. And it was a scandalous story. And to be on the side of sharing that, he had to be very vulnerable to share it. And then probably several weeks later, my girlfriend came back to me and she's just like, "Do you remember the story I told you about a year ago about blah, 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 blah?" And I was like, "Yeah, I told." Oh, and I realized that. And she's like, "Yeah, I think Rob was my husband. He was the husband of the wife that went with the."
Oh my God.
And I was like, "What?" And I went back to my husband, and that built so much trust because he had told me, and it perfectly aligned even the difficult parts with what I had heard. And so I knew at that time, okay, he's a guy who tells it like it is. And we very quickly knew we really wanted to be together. And I actually went back to counseling, and I went back and I sat with a counselor and I said, "This guy is too good to be true. I'm not sure how to handle this. Like, I am too scared to put my trust in him. I feel like I'm constantly looking for problems and the problems aren't there. And I'm just always waiting for the other shoe to drop." Yeah. And, it's been
so much kudos to you for having that self-awareness that I need support. I'm not just going to assume that this is nothing.
And I thought, I'm going to sabotage this. I can see this coming. I was so filled with fear. And it was also because I was experiencing a different kind of relationship than I had with my ex-husband. And it felt like, is it possible that this is what a relationship could be? Like, is it possible that all these good things could happen? Because I just assumed, when we talk about fairy tales and all these great things, I just assumed like, they're nothing. Yeah. People just make things up. They exaggerate. There's no such thing as that. Like, we just tolerate each other. And I really, really, really loved this man. And I more than loved him, I liked him. Like, I just looked at him, across the room, and I was just like, that's my guy. That's awesome. And I had not had that experience before. So I was thinking, okay, something's wrong. I'm in la la land. Like, when the other shoe falls, I'm going to be devastated. I need to get some counseling so I can get more realistic. I can prepare myself for the loss.
Right. And it's crazy what we think is realistic. And I get why people look at relationships and like, oh, I see their cute social media pictures and it's not realistic that they're experiencing what they say that they're experiencing. And I understand why we think that, because many people that we think were experiencing marital bliss ended up in a divorce or in some kind of crazy situation. However, there are some people who are experiencing that marital bliss.
Yeah.
There really is a percentage. I don't know what the percentage is. There's a percentage of the population that is experiencing that. And and it's one of the reasons I bring the happily married couples on. Like I talked to someone and I was like, I don't think you're as happy as you think you are. And I'm not sure I'm going to interview you. Right. I want to share what those stories look like, not because I want to tell people how to get there, because how to get there is actually a deeper work, but I want to show them like the difference, what it looks like. There's the work of the really hard marriage and everyone's just gritting their teeth all the way there. And then there's a couple like your new marriage where it's like, no, we actually do experience the joy.
Yeah, exactly. And as time has gone by, it still has continued. Not to say we have not had our ups and downs and we have not had, really difficult and challenging times, but we've sort of faced those together. It's just been such a different experience. And I'm not sure I would, and I do think partly because we both had been in marriages that dealt with infidelities and that we had that sensitivity that when we married each other, there was a different level. I know it sounds strange, but it's almost like a different level of commitment or loyalty. Like I'm taking your heart and I know it's been shattered and broken and I'm giving you mine. And we're both like not counting on each other to complete each other, but we're both like, listen, we've come together. We did our work. We're as whole as we possibly can be. And we're coming together to create like a third entity, our marriage. And it's sacred. It's truly, truly sacred to us. And we prize it above all things. And that scared me because I had not had that experience previously. And so as I was creating this with my husband, it was very scary.
Yeah, because it's unfamiliar to your nervous system. Your brain is like, what is this? We don't understand what this animal is that is loving and kind. We don't know what to do with it.
And so something is going to go wrong. And it's the biggest joke now. We always laugh. Like my husband will do something now and I'm like, this is it, isn't it? Like the other shoe's going to drop now. He's like, yeah, you're about to find out who I really am. And, just even that banter is what keeps it amusing. It keeps it fun because he knows that was my fear. And
100%. And my husband and I will have jokes like that. Like he will I don't know, he'll be doing something and or going out and I'll be like, okay, you better not talk to any women. Because if you talk to any women out there, I'm going to be there and I can fight, And it's just, we can joke about these really hard things because we know those really hard things they don't exist in our relationship.
That's right. Yeah. And I think also knowing somebody else's vulnerable points, and I know we're responsible for ourselves and we're responsible for our own feelings and actions, but I do love that he sort of holds some things more tender, that he'll be extra considerate, knowing that, okay, this is something that I know Leah would have a hard time with and be super sensitive about, and vice versa. We sort of know what these pain points are. And instead of just being like, well, they're your pain points, figure them out. It's sort of like, he treats them with a little bit more tenderness. I'll go out of the way to make sure that I know whatever the pain point is. It was different at different times in our marriage, especially at the beginning. I was a lot more insecure. He was a lot more insecure. And I think we were just a bit more tender and understanding and compassionate with each other about it, that, you've been hurt. And that hurt comes into the marriage and part of our healing, we're still healing all the time. And we're healing with each other.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. And I love that you're able to just express it, because one of the things that I want my listeners to take away from this conversation is that, when they're making their list, they can be like, yep, a guy who's going to hold my hurts tenderly. Right. And make an effort not to trample over the areas where I'm a little more sensitive or I have just a little more healing to do.
Yeah. And not judge me for it either. And then vice versa. Like it's my role to be that person for him, that I choose to be that person for him, that I want to make sure that I hold. And sometimes over the years we have had, arguments or fights, and we'll sort of look at each other like, where did that come from? And then it will sort of dawn on like, oh, okay. And then we'll talk like, well, in my previous marriage, and we've, especially early at the beginning, my husband would often, probably more so with me than the other way around, he would remind me like, I'm on your team. Like, we're not enemies with each other. I'm not your previous husband. This is not your previous marriage. This is the new life that we get to create. I'm on your team. And I'd be like, yes, that's right.
That's right.
My nervous system and my brain is getting triggered by something, and it wants to bring it into this marriage. We just need to stop it and have some awareness and say, no, this is not the same container. This is not the same environment. This is different now. And that allows me then to also bring out different parts of me because I'm in that safe environment.
Oh, so good. So good. I love that so much. And I know you had told me that like the way your marriage is thriving is because you have all these like little ordinary things that you guys enjoy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, we just do, I think, everything down to we have done date nights, and we have done just little messages with each other. I think we had 5 kids together as a blended family, and really forging together to make our marriage a priority and letting our kids know that while our kids are super important, our marriage is important. And it's in the little moments that, doing all these little things for each other, taking care of each other and treating our marriage, like I said, as that third entity. So
how do you make time for that? How do you make time for like making the marriage the priority with 5 children?
Well, sometimes it was very late at night. We didn't try to coordinate our schedules. So we had times where we had all 5 kids, at times where it was just my 2, times where it just his 3. And then we had one night a week, every single week, where it was just us. And we went every single Wednesday night up until COVID, essentially, for sushi. And it was the same restaurant. They know us really well. And one time we happened to bring one of our kids with us, and they were like, who's this?
Their children?
And we said, oh, it's like my son. Like, what? Yeah, we have 5. What? They had no clue that we even had children. And it was just like, this is our space. This is our restaurant. And we decided we're never bringing any kids back to that restaurant before. But it was carving out a little time. And sometimes it did mean sacrificing some sleep. It did mean sacrificing, some work time. But really, if it's just a few minutes, I think also we spent a lot of time even just on texting, like sending each other little texts throughout. And we still do that. My husband has like the cutest little, I guess it's an emoji that he created, like a Bitmoji he created of himself. And so he'll send it. And it just makes me laugh every time, like with the message, like, and so I think it's tiny things like that. It's those moments that just carry you through. Yeah. The big things like the big holidays and vacations and like Valentine's Day and all those things. But it's those everyday little cute messages. I'm thinking of you. Good luck today. Do you want to go for dinner? Even though like we go for dinner every Wednesday night. Hey, do you want to go for dinner tonight? Like just sort of the cuteness of it, keeping it up.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I'm like, oh yeah, I should send out my husband and we do that too. But I'm like, oh yeah, Leah and Rob have it going on. I'm gonna like step up my game.
Well, but now we're both working from home, and it's a little bit different because we're both from home. But we still I'll still be doing some work, and I'll look over, and he'll have like the emoji thing is just hilarious. He'll have it with just like, what you up to? With like this cute little face. And
we use Snapchat. Snapchat has like really cute.
That's so cute. I should, I think you have to, it is all about the little moments. And when you let those little moments go, then everything does become a lot more stressful and and I do think that, there's lots of big things that you do face as a couple, but when you have all those little moments in between, it's easier to stand together for those bigger things because you've been woven together. Like the fabric is all woven together through all the little things.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Leah, I love your story. So much wisdom in it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing so transparently. Could you please tell the listeners where they can find you if they'd like to work with you as a life coach, dealing with some stress or wanting to build resilience? Please tell them where they can find you on social media and on your website.
Sure. I am at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. That's on Instagram and Facebook. And my website is leahdavidsonlifecoaching.com. I also have a podcast and it's called Building Resilience. So you get lots of tips. I do share quite a bit of different things from my own life, my own story, so you can weave things together. But yeah, I would love to connect with anybody who is going through any challenge or they just want to create more joy in their life. That's what I work with. I help you manage the everyday stuff so you can get to the joy.
So good. All right, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. Leah's links will all be in the show notes, so you can click through to find her and connect with her online. I want to appreciate Leah for being here. Like I can't go through all the things you said because everything was so good. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. This was so much fun. And for everyone listening, we want to thank you for your time and attention, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening today. If you are ready to get married after divorce, I want to invite you to download my free 8-video training specifically designed to help divorced women date with ease and get married again. Head over to sadecurry.com to get started. That's SADECURRY.com. I'll see you inside.